Cool. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's live session. We are live on Voice of Crypto's LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. And we have with us a really special guest today. Every Wednesday, we at Voice of Crypto come up with special guests from the Web3, crypto, and blockchain space from across the globe. And today, we have with us yet another really interesting guest. We have Mr. Prashant Surana Jain with us, who is the co-founder of Snapper Blockchain Technology and Innovation. He's a serial entrepreneur, especially in the AI and blockchain space. And we all know that there are quite a few questions, key questions around these two developing sectors. And we have a really interesting guest today who will be talking and noting down some of the very important questions that are pertaining to AI and blockchain and Web3 as well. So, hi, Prashant, really happy to have you here today.
Yeah, hi, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thanks to you for joining. And there is a lot that you've accomplished at such a young age. And it says that you are a believer in the blockchain age. And you started Snapper around 8 years back. So you have been in the blockchain technology space or sector for quite a bit of time, more than most people have been. I think my first question, which is a question to all my guests and would be to you as well, is how did you sort of come across Web3 and blockchain? And how has your journey been in this space?
Yeah, sure. So actually, it all began in 2016, early 2016. So I started a company in 2012, which was into AI image analytics. And then I ran it for 3 years. So the idea was basically to build computer vision and ML technologies to help the problem of shoppers and help them meet the right products. So let's say you like any t-shirt, watch, or anything, and you can just take a picture of it and it could just tell you what price it is available across the platform and things like that. So we build and scale the complete e-commerce model around it. So we did that for like 3.5 years, and during that time we got an acquisition offer from one of the Chinese and Hong Kong based company. So that was my first time I went to Hong Kong for my transaction. And during that time, I also got an opportunity to showcase our technology at Rise Hong Kong, which is like one of the biggest tech conferences. So during my time there were a lot of people, a lot of these crypto OGs who actually visited that conference. I mean, if I look back now, and then they started to talk to me about Bitcoin and all of these technologies and how Bitcoin makes like money accessible faster, and you could just really send it to over anyone on the internet. So I was actually quite amazed, and I have a interesting background in economics, where I dropped out of engineering to join business just because I was very much interested in the macro and microeconomics on a whole. So this economics of Bitcoin like really made sense to me in a lot of ways. I mean, I could actually connect between the demand and supply and scarcity and all these fundamentals and philosophies of money. So but when I looked into this technology, that was much more interesting to me, because I also have an interestingly a tech background, where I have worked on a lot of products. I have done some lot of architecturing and things like that on the tech space. So I could actually connect blockchain with the overall database level and how it could essentially solve the central point of failures from my perspective, and also security issues which we face with a lot of infrastructure today. And this was pretty exciting and interesting to me. So and then I basically came back to India, and then I started to think about how we can do something around that technology, because I was done with AI back then. And then I decided to start Snapper Future Tech with my partners and family friend who brings like a very deep enterprise background. I mean, they have worked with a lot of ERPs at very senior levels, globally implemented ERPs across a lot of industries. However, that particular background was essentially missing in my journey, where I have built a lot of B2C products, not B2B product. And but I was good at the overall architecture and the technology side of things, and that's how my journey with overall blockchain industry started. And then while I was on it, I came across a lot of videos and a lot of things on the internet by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who's the founder of internet, and talking about Web3, and then how blockchain is one of those factors at the infrastructure level which would help in that transition. But I
Yeah.
think if you look at there's like still long way for us to go there. And then I ended up investing in cryptos, bought Ethereum at their ICOs, and then that's how my thing started. A lot of poker games happening in China where I met a lot of crypto OGs, and we started to talk about it. And interestingly, you won't believe, I mean, there was a time where I will have actually seen a Binance deal happening where CZ was trying to raise capital for Binance in 2017 and 2018, but still I was overall trying to figure out that how crypto works, because it just bounced off from me. But the
Yeah.
blockchain was very much interesting to me because I could connect it to a lot of real world problems which enterprises face. And then I
Mm.
decided that I think it's better to be on the enterprise side of things than crypto side of things because of regulatory and a lot of things.
Right.
However, I have really been connected to the space for a long time.
Wow, sounds like a pretty interesting journey, and you did sum up quite a bit of years in this little time. And I was checking your profile, and I saw that you have been an advisor for the government of Montenegro for their digital assets policies and crypto advisory, basically. So, how exactly were you involved with their government? And I think once you answer that, I have we would love for you to draw a certain bit of comparison between different regulatory aspects in different geographies across the world. But first, let's start with your role as an advisor with the government.
So, I mean, if you look at Montenegro, it's pretty much very small country in the Europe, in the Mediterranean region of Europe,
Hmm.
and they were really wanted to actually invite a lot of these innovative ideas and technologies to Montenegro, and Montenegro essentially has a lot of these gaming companies which is established out of Montenegro. I mean, online casinos and other kind of gaming companies, and being a part of you get actually an access to set up your base there, and then get access to the entire Eurozone. So
Hmm.
they were pretty much on the lines that this industry or this thing basically needs to be regulated, because
Yeah.
they have seen their country and this entire gaming industry actually kind of evolving with a progressive policies and laws. And similarly, they wanted the same because when I started with them, the entire Europe was still evolving and discussing around on how to basically kind of regulate it, and what are the things which we can you know make it to be more adoptable and suitable
Hmm.
government.
Hmm.
But for me, the overall approach, which I have always felt, that you need to have an hybrid approach. I mean, you need to have a free market combined with a bit of governance, right? I mean, if you really try to govern something, it would eventually move out of your control. I mean, you can see this in India, where government really wanted to have excessive control, and we see a lot of these parallel markets or the cash markets, which is actually emerging, and it gives rise to other illicit activities. So the
Hmm.
overall idea was to have an hybrid approach where you also give free hand to entrepreneurs in building
Yeah.
things, building ideas, and shifting their base to Montenegro. And at the same time, you need to have a very high quality of governance in terms of protecting illicit activities. So that was the overall ideas and the approach. The second thing was that Montenegro is has a lot of beautiful beach, and their economy is majorly driven by tourists. I mean, overall, so they actually believed in the use case and the idea of the real estate tokenization, and that I would actually help them prosper their traditional real estate business. So Montenegro has been one of those countries and geographies to have adopted tokenization around real estate. So that was the second idea, where we wanted to bring a lot of these real world assets to the blockchain and make it accessible to the people. But I think there are still a lot of things which the
Hmm.
world is basically trying to figure it out when we come to real asset tokenization, because your capital markets needs to be well structured enough. However, Montenegro has been not so much pro with their traditional capital markets comparatively their stock exchange. I mean, it's a very strong small country. So
Yeah.
I mean, you would have a lot of these investors would look out for a lot of liquidity, a lot of market depth, a lot of institutional presence when they want to invest into traditional capital markets. However, Montenegro lagged on those parameters. right? So that was the other area. And the overall, I mean, the people and the government, I mean, it's a small country, right? So everyone is, kind of connected to one, and everybody is open to hear out thoughts and, discuss and have a lot of these round tables around how, we can solve issues. The overall interesting thing is it's very good when you have a small, country, because you have a very structured and streamlined governance model. So your adoption and approach is like much faster and easier.
Absolutely. So, when you look at some of the most developed or advanced economies in the world today who are leveraging blockchain technology, which would they be, and why were they able to sort of, um, you know,
See,
able to do this?
to be very honest, I haven't really seen. I think the first and the most important use case for blockchain technology has been
Hmm.
banking, and when I mean by banking, specifically core banking. And
Hmm.
I have also worked in some of the projects with Hong Kong Stock Exchange in Hong Kong, where we were trying to build settlement models with them. And I have seen China actually really trying to adopt blockchain at a much faster rate, and since like 3 4 5 years, and they actually had a plan for CBDC. But however, China is again like kind of a closed economy, so you really don't know what is much happening then unless until you are there. And the second country which I would see, which I have seen where there is a massive blockchain adoption, is been India. So India has done a lot of fantastic work with their CBDC implementation. I mean, the overall approach and basically penetrating specifically into the wholesale banking is
Hmm.
something which is commendable and tremendous. While a lot of other geographies, I think most of their banking systems are still not evolved and matured as fast as India and China. I think India and China has by far the one of the best banking systems around the world when we talk about transactions and the scalability of those such transactions. And other geographies, they have been trying to, I mean, US, the banks have been trying to understand and implement blockchain. But the overall friction is where that in US laws, a law around allows like a lot of these banks to issue their own private currencies, and they can appoint a custodian to kind of settle off those transactions, because US is a very capitalistic mechanism. So when you have so much players in the market, also the challenge when it basically comes to overall implementation, and also you find a lot of friction there. So I think most of the countries are still figuring out on how to approach it, because when we talk about implementing blockchain, the idea, or essentially the idea, is that you would want to eliminate all these silos. And today most of the organizations and most of the companies, they use very siloed enterprise infrastructure. So, for example, if there is one particular bank, and if that bank is been using Oracle as their core enterprise platform, it is
Hmm.
always difficult to kind of create a bridge from Oracle to SAP to Salesforce, and Microsoft resources, and things like that. So I think the biggest challenge is still on the traditional side of things, where you would want to basically streamline your architecture and make these bridges available for everyone to basically adopt and connect. But whereas with India and China, we have got those universal bridges, where NPCI has done like a very fantastic work of creating one universal bridge especially for transactions, and then building blockchain frameworks like Beam and Vajra on the top of that, which would basically open the market up for developers and startups and companies to kind of adopt and build the use cases. So I particularly think that we are still quite far away when we talk about real world use cases and implementations. But this is what's been happening. But the supply chain is also one interesting area where we are actually seeing real world implementation, and specifically the space of sustainability and green finance has been attracting quite traction there, where consumers are now more aware about their source of the product. So we are
Hmm.
seeing a lot of things actually happening there. But I
Yeah.
think still we are like at least 5 to 10 years behind when we talk about the real world implementation, because the
Hmm.
first and foremost step would be the digital identity, like to have one universal digital identity. So I think
Hmm.
that is the first step, and India is on the prominent position to define that first step. And definitely we are going to see some rollouts coming on onto the identity space, and then you would have a lot of other real world applications which would be built on the top of that ID infrastructure.
Absolutely. So you spoke about quite a few use cases that are yet untouched by a lot of economies across the globe. And if we talk about some of the real world challenges that economies would face while gauging how to implement these technologies, what would they be, and what are one of the few challenges that India is facing as an economy when it comes to sort of adoption of this technology?
See, I think first and the foremost is, I think the people, right? I mean, dealing with people is really, really difficult. You would always have two kinds of people who would want to operate in transparency and ethically, and the people who would always want to, kind of control things and be on the dominant side. So, I mean, addressing the people's issue is like quite a very big issue. I mean, when Snapper started in 2017, one of the first use cases which we did or which we wanted to was to revolutionize the real estate industry by bringing the land and the property transactions on the blockchain, because property disputes are like massive in India. I mean, out of every I mean, out of thousands and lakhs of court cases, at least 25 to 30% cases are just properties, and then we wanted to go after that massive problem. But when you go into the system deeper and you realize that the system has been like very much corrupted by its own people, right? I mean, most of the black money actually goes in the real estate. So which means you are again dealing with the problem, and then you are not able to solve it because the people themselves don't want this particular problem to be solved. I think this similar thing actually applies, across a lot of different areas, right?
Hmm.
Where people really wouldn't want to have a lot of transparency. The same thing you can also look out for into banking. I mean, our banking channel is like still very close and very much pretty much dominant. I mean, our government or RBI predominantly does not encourage free markets and the free movement of capital, which is again one of those fictions. And the third and the other fiction, if I have to talk about supply chains and things like that, I think on that side of things everyone is pretty much open, because everyone believes, I mean, because that particular business and the model is more consumer driven, and we have seen a very drastic shift from a consumer mindset which is happening, that okay, the products which I'm consuming has to be authentic, my medicines or my supplies has to be authentic, I should really know the source of it, I should really know, I mean, whether it is contributing to the sustainability or not. So we are definitely seeing some shift happening on the supply chain, and because it gives a lot of advantages not only to consumers but also to businesses in terms of optimize their lot of costs and to fix their leakages internally, because their business model is definitely dependent on the supply chain and the logistics. So I definitely see the supply chain space pretty much evolving pretty fast, because there's a perfect synergy between the consumers and the businesses, while the
Hmm.
other sectors, if we have to talk about, I think there is still a lot of fiction, and definitely it would take some time for the real world implementation. And the last and the foremost challenge is basically the infrastructure challenge. I mean, when we have to deploy a massive blockchain infrastructure, you would need to set up a lot of different nodes, set up consensus and things like that. So which makes it again like an infrastructure heavy, and companies would end up spending a lot of money on that particular infrastructure, because we talk about decentralization, setting of nodes and things like that. So we would still need to be watchful on how to basically optimize those cost on the infrastructure, because again the business decision is typically dependent on cost versus revenues, right? So these are the challenges and the fiction which I personally see.
Hmm. In terms of the regulatory aspects of what and where businesses in India stand, what are your views on it? And is the environment conducive, or is there still a bit of shady business happening in terms of how Web3 entrepreneurs are functioning in the country?
So by Web3, you basically mean like proper Web3, not enterprise Web3, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So see, I think first and the most important thing is that, of course, I mean, the regulatory environment is really not been favorable so far, and I think everyone has to be blamed for that. I mean, not only government but also
Yeah.
people and the participants, right? Like, I mean, previously, a lot of consumers or the users of this ecosystem have discovered a lot of fundamental flaws and have used the system massively for illicit money laundering and other activities, which definitely creates a like red flag within the mind of regulators. The second thing is, like, I mean, when we had this ICO, IDO, and coin offering booms, we have also seen a lot of scams and all of these things basically happening. So which is again quite difficult to monitor and to control and manage. And the third and the most important thing is that this thing predominantly exists completely over the internet. So meaning,
Yeah.
I mean, there is very limited touch points for every regulator to basically kind of look into things and fix those gaps. And those particular gaps can only be fixed by consumers, where consumers or the users should really know that, okay, I mean, I shouldn't fall for these such short term money traps, and I should be basically be lawful or how I use this overall technology, right? And also, I mean, from the government side, they definitely, a lot of these people, they feel that they are losing control
Yeah.
on things like money specifically. So they feel that they I mean, by imposing harsher regulations and restrictions, they can actually control the economy and control the internet. I mean, this is exactly something where like the governments around the world actually restricted people from using the internet unless and until the moment for free information and free speech started. So I think we are also similarly at that influx point where people really want to have control over the information, control over the data, control over their money, and control over their digital assets, which is data across the internet. So I think that revolution can only be brought in by the consumers and
Yeah.
also the entrepreneurs in the space. And if you see the overall ecosystem and the landscape, I think Indian entrepreneurs have been leading this particular landscape. And also the good thing is that I think the government has not really specifically from an Indian perspective has put the outright ban. They have just put restrictions on how you use crypto transactions, which is still okay. And also compared to India, and if you compare to other geographies, operating Web3 companies is much, much easier and cost effective in India. I mean, if you have to set up a similar companies
Yeah.
in the US, UK, or in Dubai or somewhere where you have clear laws, but it's still very expensive for entrepreneurs actually to survive. I mean, your initial days is about bootstrapping, about being frugal. So I think India is still very perfectly positioned, and I'm seeing the government to be mindful and watchful of this entire industry and see where it is basically evolving globally. So I think the onus is basically on the entrepreneurs and also on the users on how they would take this industry and how they would basically use or build this technology for people's good.
Right. And while we are on the topic of regulations, I mean, we have to address the elephant in the room, which is the current friction between the US SEC and the two of the biggest exchanges, Binance and then Coinbase. And there are a lot of articles floating around in media which say that this could put the progress that cryptocurrencies or the industry made back by a lot of years. So, what is this friction in your view? Where is it headed? And do you feel like it would put the sector back in terms of development?
No, see, I think there is the good side and the bad side. I mean, if I have to look at the good side, you could actually see people are becoming more aware and realizing how the governments basically, control and how they are basically lobbied by big organizations like banks and, things like that. So all of their government's internal illicit practices and activities are basically coming to light to the people. But however, government and the governance being like throughout the history, they try to impose a lot of things, but eventually freedom and the right approach and the people have ultimately win throughout the history, right? And when we talk about us is a combination of capitalism and democracy, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these capitalist entrepreneurs, they support freedom. And I think when the internet revolution also started in the 1980s, right? Government was strictly against of making internet available to public, but I mean, the entrepreneurs there, the users there, and the overall mindset and the community fought with the government and won ultimately. And now internet is basically available to everyone. So this is exactly what I see with cryptos. But today, what is exactly happening is also a lot of combination of politics. I mean, right? Like, for example, like FTX would definitely, want to go after CZ and Binance, and then there's a lot of link and the history between the FTX and the Gary Gensler, who's the current chair of, SEC. So I think it is not only about the governments and the regulatory things, but a lot of also personal, ambitions and also these kind of lobbying and these connections which is actually happening. But the way personally I see it, I think, see, eventually you are seeing, and across everywhere, that massive companies like BlackRock, they are trying to go after asset tokenization. They are trying to go after cryptocurrencies overall. They are being very vocal about cryptos. We have
Yeah.
seen some of the big banks trying to support this industry, support this set of entrepreneurs. So ultimately, the biggest question is basically what has to be treated as securities and what has to be basically treated,
Absolutely.
and cryptocurrencies, I mean the particular digital assets. So the SECs and the government is trying to draw the line between those assets and those offerings, and I think we have been in a gray area for a long time. And still, we are trying to use Howey's test to basically determine whether what is
Mm,
securities and whether what is not securities. And I think Howey's test is also pretty much updated, seeing a lot of development happening in the space. But of course, I think overall, the Web3 ecosystem and the community would definitely win. And I see a lot of new people are actually getting into this ecosystem, and there is a lot of information available on the internet which is being produced by people like you and everyone trying to promote freedom of speech, freedom of data, and freedom of money, ultimately. So I think definitely we would win, and we would move or ahead, move in the right direction.
absolutely, couldn't agree more. And we're almost running to at the end of our time. And my final question to you would be: what are your three biggest expectations from this space this year? 2 quarters already down, and two more to go. Do you think it will be? And I don't like to use the term much, but would it be a bullish or a bearish year? How would the sector pan out?
See, I think definitely I have been always bullish about this overall ecosystem and the overall space. However, we have to also be, cautious with a lot of these things which has been happening with a lot of these meme coins and things like that, which is actually coming up and trying to drain up, investors' money. So overall, my particular opinion, I mean, from a long-term perspective and near-short perspective, the first thing is that we are about to see the Bitcoin halving, which has always been, a bull in the entire history. The other interesting development is that we are going to have results of the Ripple versus SEC lawsuit. I think that is going to be the landmark lawsuit to basically determine where the entire crypto industry is going to move. And also, we are seeing a lot of proposals and improvements on a lot of L1, L2s, trying to come up with a lot of scalability solutions, and trying to onboard and tap the
Yeah.
other industry and the other space. And then also and also we can see that a lot of investors are still trying to participate and trying to keep this industry active. And there is still influx of capital into the good projects, into the projects which has revolutionary ideas and actually solving core real problems. And the most important thing which I am really excited about is basically interoperability and cross bridges. I think there have been a lot of cross bridges and a lot of people trying to solve interoperability. However, the biggest concerns being the security concern, right? I mean, when the transaction is done or when hack basically happened, there is no point to basically reverse it. So I'm more interested, and I'm trying to push Ethereum Foundation for some kind of a protocol or a proposal where people like can basically reverse their transactions, or basically those assets can be destroyed whenever there is an hack, and the users can be compensated with the fresh new assets. I think this particular problem, if we figure out a way to solve it, I think this would definitely onboard more and more people, because people are scared. with their
Yeah.
wallet, with their identities, that they might get hacked, they might lose their asset, and things like that. And we are seeing a lot of phishing, impersonation, and rise in hacks. So this particular proposition or a proposal, and I would also expect people of the community to get in touch with me, so we can actually talk about this and try to see how we can solve this particular problem, right? And make it more accessible. So this would definitely help us onboard next billion users. So I'm definitely positive and overall bullish about this entire industry. The only thing is there are these five things which we have to be mindful about, and these are pretty exciting. So let's see how it goes.
And hopefully we will all be pretty optimistic about this year. And like you said, there are quite going to be quite a few landmark judgments, quite a few landmark events that are going to happen in the space, which will keep the community on their toes. And once again, thank you so much, Prashant, for joining us today. It was a really intense discussion, and we would be awaiting if there is actually something in works between you and the Ethereum Foundation. And I would request all my viewers today to please go ahead and follow Mr. Prashant Surana Jain, Bitcoin Man India. And for such amazing conversations, do stay tuned to Voice of Crypto, and do give a like to both Prashant and Voice of Crypto. Once again, thank you so much, Prashant, for this really interesting discussion.
Same here,
It
it's
was,
my pleasure. Thank you so much.
thank you so much.
Bye. Yeah.